7th Victory Day, even as Ukraine war enters third month. Putin's address to the nation on Victory Day is the most watched event in the country. The Victory Day parade is one of the most significant events in Russia. Held on 9th of May, it marks the end of World War II in Europe, and with the defeat and surrender of Nazi Germany on 8th May 1945, Moscow and many parts of Russia and Russian-captured territories, including Mariupol, are going to be witnessing celebrations of Victory Day, or what is locally called the Patriotic War. President Putin is expected to use the occasion as a means to promote patriotic unity and showcase the country's military might. Amongst the pro-war additions this year, a group of fighter jets is expected to fly over central Moscow in the shape of a Z, a popular symbol of support for Russian troops in Ukraine. According to Russia's defense ministry, there will be 129 military vehicles and 10,000 personnel this year. In total, 11,000 people, 131 units of industrial and special equipment, 77 aircrafts and helicopters are going to take part in the parade. Visuals coming in from Red Square in Moscow. Putin marks Victory Day with Moscow military parade and speech. Visuals on your screens right now. The visuals coming in at the moment. Right now we're getting you all the latest details as well. 75 days of war, but really Putin has not succeeded. Big questions arising on whether Putin has succeeded or not. The answer and the clear answer to that, even after 75 days of war, is a no. Putin has not succeeded. This is the biggest coverage of Russia's Victory Day muscle. We're getting you the latest right now on the Victory Day, and just to give you a background of this Victory Day for our viewers who have just tuned in, we're getting you covered from all angles. We're getting you more reporters to join you on this as well. But Russia celebrating Victory Day, that's the big story. Breaking news coming in right now. Let's go straight across to news that is breaking at the moment. Breaking news coming in. Putin defends invasion in Victory Day speech. Putin says Russia face unacceptable threat in Ukraine. Putin also says Russia fighting on its own soil. Putin has likened the invasion to Soviet firefighting in World War II. Most anticipated Putin speech. That's the latest coming in. Putin says Russia fighting on its own soil, in a way insinuating that this Ukraine is their own soil. Putin likens the invasion to Soviet fighting in World War II. The breaking news is about Putin going on to defend the war, going on to defend the invasion in the Victory Day speech, going on to say that Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine and Russia fighting on its own soil. He has likened the invasion to Soviet fighting in World War II. Most anticipated Putin speech. That's the latest coming in right now. Russia fighting on its own soil. Victory Day parade on your screens right now. The visuals that you see of the parade taking place. We're getting you latest updates. The breaking news coming in at the moment is on Putin saying that defending invasion in the Victory Day speech and saying Russia is facing an unacceptable threat in Ukraine. Geeta Mahone now joins us. Geeta, I mean, it's been 3 months of war and they haven't really been successful in Ukraine. And at the moment, Putin's Victory Day speech, it's very ironic given the fact that Ukraine has put up a rather bold front in the face of Russian invasion on Ukraine.
Well, Chetty, now
let's re-establish that connection right there. to Geeta Mohan, who's joining us in just about a bit. She's our foreign affairs editor. She's going to be joining us in just moments from now. But Russia has faced an unacceptable threat, according to Putin. Putin has defended invasion in the Victory Day speech, going on to say that Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine and Russia fighting on its own soil. He has likened the invasion to Soviet fighting in World War II. Geeta Mohan back with us. Geeta, sorry about the interruption. We lost you for a moment there. Continue.
Right, so this is a gentleman whose father fought in the World War II. This is the Besmiertny Polk, which is the Immortal Regiment, and they normally take a procession out immediately after the parade is over. What is your memory of your father?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Grandfather. Big man
Yeah.
who victory fascism in world.
All right, so this you will see a lot of these, Chaiti, a lot of people who would be holding photographs of their relatives, their grandparents, and walk the streets of Moscow trying to immortalize the memory of those who laid down their lives in World War II. So coming back to your question about victory, now it is very relative because the parameters are different. We know that there are many goals that have not been achieved, but a lot of territory has been taken. South of Dnieper River, a lot of the area which has been taken, and what was very important and crucial for Putin was Mariupol, the Donbas region. Remember, he began his speech by mentioning Kharkiv, Mariupol, Donbas, which means that he actually, the idea of Russian invasion, aggression, and the action, the war that Russia waged against Ukraine was limited to a few areas, that's eastern Ukraine. And that objective, certainly, while not fully met, has been met significantly. Now, even if there are negotiations, the big question would be, would the territories be given back to Ukraine or not? And we're not talking about Donbas or Crimea. We're talking about areas beyond Donbas where we've traveled and it has been de-Ukrainized in many ways than one. It's completely Russianized now. So will those territories be returned or not? And in that, yes, there have been gains that Russia has made. But to what cost? Now, that cost has been explained in the speech by President Putin, where he says there are a few non-negotiables, areas that Ukraine ventured into, which were unacceptable. One is the fact that that the Ukrainian authorities had started speaking going nuclear, which is unacceptable. NATO expansion eastwards is an existential threat, is what Russia thinks, and the reason that Putin gave.
And I do believe, Geeta, that there has been blame that has been passed on to Western nations as well in his speech. If you could encapsulate that for us as well.
Well, absolutely. He's taken on the West. He's spoken about, called them hypocrites, spoken about double standards, said that when their security comes to is at risk, then they do anything that they wish to. But when Russia talks about its own security, then Russia is an aggressor. Well, nobody is justifying what has happened in Ukraine. It is unjustifiable. But the fact is that the Russian administration over here really spelling it out, President Putin spelling out exactly why these actions had to be taken, which is the quote-unquote existential threat that Russia keeps talking about, that poses a huge danger for Russia and Russia's security, and is the reason why these actions have been taken. But again, Chaiti, when negotiations take place, will Russia return the territories that have been captured beyond Donbas and Crimea? That's one critical area that needs to be looked into. So while they say that, we see a lot of reports coming in saying that Russia has not made gains, Russia has not succeeded. The question is, did Russia ever want to completely invade and take Ukraine, or the territories that have been taken were their main focus and goal? And if this was their goal and they do not return the territories to Ukraine, should there be negotiations and looking at a peaceful settlement, then that this area will continue to remain an area of conflict and also an area that will be completely under Russian control. Now that certainly is an area that the world and that Ukraine should be looking at.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We're getting some breaking news coming in. Putin's most anticipated speech concludes. No open declaration by Putin on Ukraine war. Putin says Russia fighting on its own soil and says Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine. That's the latest that is coming in after his most anticipated speech. In fact, the whole world, not just Russia. Let me tell our viewers, it is not just restricted to Russia and Ukraine. This impacts the entire world. And this was the most anticipated speech, the one by Russian President Vladimir Putin, and that has concluded. There has been no open declaration by Putin on Ukraine war, and he's gone on to say that Russia is fighting on its own soil. He says Russia face unacceptable threat in Ukraine. Geeta Mahone still continues to be with us on this story. Geeta, if you could just tell our viewers the top takeaways from the most anticipated speech of Russian President Vladimir Putin that has just concluded.
Well, a few very important takeaways and pointers. The fact that he's mentioned Mariupol, which is part of Donbass, but he's mentioned Kharkiv. And he's mentioned areas that have been taken by Russia beyond Donbass and Crimea. That's a very clear message that these areas are not going to go back to Ukraine. Secondly, if Ukraine continues to speak about nuclear or
let's re-establish that connection right there to Geeta Mahone, who's getting us all the very latest on the story. She was giving us the key takeaways from the most anticipated speech, and most anticipated speech not just for Russia but for the entire world. Geeta Mahone is back. Geeta, sorry we lost you there.
Right, Chetty. So the second very important point over here, apart from the fact that he's mentioned Kharkiv, Mariupol, Kharkiv is an area outside of Donbass, which means that these territories that they're taking will not be returned to Ukraine. So the longer this conflict continues, the greater loss of land it would be for Ukraine. And that is only because while NATO says that they're going to supply weapons, there has been no backing for Ukraine when it comes to NATO in terms of force. And unless and until that happens, unlikely that Ukraine will be able to reclaim most of the territories that have now been de-Ukrainized, so to say, or Russianized. Secondly, and very importantly over here, President Putin spelling out the reasons for the war, which is what he calls special military operations, because NATO's eastward expansion is unacceptable, and Ukraine talking about going nuclear, absolutely unacceptable. These two things are existential threats for Russia. The third very important point that he made was calling out the West, saying that when it comes to their security, everything is fair. But when Russia looks at Russia's own security, Russia is considered an aggressor. Well, again, like I said, Chetty, we cannot justify any kind of aggression and invasion, but this is what President Putin's justification was. And most importantly over here, while this is Victory Day, the victory of and the end of World War II in Europe, which is the defeat of Nazi Germany. Japan surrendered in September. That was the end of World War II, but this is end of World War II in Europe. And in that, what President Putin did was again reminded people of the role that Soviet Union played. If you see, and we've been reporting on this, not just in Moscow, every part of Russia, every captured territory in Ukraine has not just Russian flags, but also the Soviet victory flag, reminding everyone and reasserting the idea of Soviet Union, which is what he did from this platform as well. So a few very important areas that he touched upon. The speech was brief, not very long, very concise, but he made the points that he wanted to make with regards to Ukraine, with regards to NATO, with regards to the West, and with regards to Soviet Union and the idea of Soviet Union.
All right, and that were the key takeaways from Putin's most anticipated speech that Geeta is getting us right now, which has concluded, and there has been no open declaration by Putin as well on the Ukraine war. What do you make of this, Geeta, as our foreign affairs editor?
No declaration of war. Chetty, a lot of people were speculating that there could be a declaration of war. There cannot be a declaration of war beyond what already has been done. The fact that Russia has been emphasizing and re-emphasizing that this for them is not war. They're not waging war against Ukraine. They're not against the people of Ukraine. This is a quote-unquote special military operation against a regime in Kyiv who have been, according to Russia, fascist, Nazi. They've called each other names, both sides. So we are not getting into the name calling by Russia and Ukraine, but against a regime that poses grave threat to Russia's existence. Why? Because of their west-leaning tendencies, because of the idea of them wanting to join the NATO, and because the Ukrainian administration has started speaking about how they regret having given up nuclear arms and that they should be armed again. And that certainly is a concern for Russia. But having said that, a declaration of war would have been going beyond Dnieper, going ahead and going back to Kyiv, which is not the idea over here. They withdrew from Kyiv for a reason. The Istanbul conference and the meeting that took place in Istanbul and the agreements that they had, the areas that they had agreed on after which they withdrew from Kyiv was for a reason. The reason why they went into Kyiv also was very specific to military operations, trying to scatter Ukrainian forces so that they can take most parts of eastern Ukraine, and which is what they managed to do. Mariupol is near completely under now Russian force. The Ukrainian civilians have been evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant, which is the last area that the Ukrainians were holding. And beyond that, Mariupol is considered
what
part
is
of Donetsk.
Geeta? What
So the
does
Donbass
Putin
region, which,
even mean?
Putin is already
And if you could interpret what he's trying to say, because I'm unable to personally comprehend this, that he goes on to say that Russia has faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine. What is the unacceptable threat that he's talking about? He was the one to launch an offensive on Ukraine.
Well, the unacceptable threat is the idea of Ukraine going nuclear and Ukraine joining the NATO. These are two areas that Russia has drawn a red line and said that these are red lines. If this happens, it is an existential threat to Russia. And I'll give you an example and a comparison, Chetty. When the Cuban Missile Crisis happened in the 60s, Russia had placed its missiles in Cuba, and America considered that a major threat. And it was unacceptable, because of which we saw the entire Cuban Missile Crisis in that region, in that area. And now when Russia is saying the same thing, it has become unacceptable, and Russia's policies are being criticized across the world. The only difference over here is that Russia is an aggressor. Russia has gone into a territory which is foreign, and every country should be allowed to conduct its foreign policy. But should that become a huge existential threat, and this is what the existential threat is, having NATO, allowing NATO space in Ukraine, according to Russia, Chetty, what Russia says is that, well, they can have their foreign policy, they can have independent foreign policy. Lavrov, in the interview to us, said the very same thing. They can. But is it independent? If NATO enters, the decision to allow NATO entry into Ukraine would be Ukraine's. But the decisions that NATO will take from there on will not be Ukraine's. And then the decisions that NATO will take will pose grave threat and danger to Russia. Is the reason why Russia says these are existential threats, and is the reason why Russia did what it did. So they've given the reasons. We've heard these reasons. Again, entering territories is unacceptable. People over here, youngsters over here, Chetty, say that in 21st century, war is not the option. They could have looked at other options. So there are quite a few. There is a varied opinion in Russia itself. A lot of youngsters do not believe in war. They want peace. A lot of them say we do not know whether if he was right, he's wrong, but we do want peace. Also remember, there are historical ties between Ukraine and Russia, the familial ties between Ukraine and Russia. Every person, every other person you meet over here would have some relative, family.
Would
in
you say
Ukraine.
that
You
Putin
meet
has
people in
used this
Ukraine, they have
occasion to further intensify the struggling campaign, or he's not done that? What would you make of his speech? Has he taken this particular moment to further intensify the campaign?
Well, it more than intensify the campaign, because the intensification has already happened. It happened a few weeks ago when they moved out of Kyiv and focused their energies in eastern Ukraine. But more than that, it was also a moment, because May 9th was to be celebrated, but he used this as a moment to tell people that they're all part of the erstwhile Soviet Union, that they shouldn't forget that they all stood together and fought Nazi Germany. So he used this as a rallying point to garner support. There is trouble within. There is trouble when it comes to the economy as well. There has been inflation, Chaiti. There is inflation in Russia. Food products have, the prices of food products have gone up, but prices mainly of food products that middle class or upper middle class can or cannot afford. He's kept the prices of basic food items to what they were, or has tried to absorb the inflation there, so that people don't feel the pinch. But again, he is troubled. There is stress. The sanctions are not similar to the sanctions that Russia faced for so many years. They are harsher. The treasury and the bonds, government treasury has been frozen, which did not happen before. The bullion, which is gold reserves, have been frozen. That did not happen before, and this is the first time, Chaiti, that Russia is defaulting on its loan payments, debt payments. Not a huge amount of debt that Russia has. Russia managed to pay off all its debts, but whatever debt that Russia has, this is the first time that they defaulted. And we know why that happens. It's not because Russia does not have the money. It's because everything is frozen. Russia even offered to say that, okay, if we can't pay in the dollars that you've frozen, let us pay in our rubles, which was not accepted. So a lot of firsts have happened in Russia. When it comes to the economy, they will start feeling the pinch. At the macro level, they are feeling it. But when it comes to the ground over here, the micro level, inflation is up 20% higher, they're saying. But food products and basic necessities are being controlled. Prices are being controlled. So Putin is under pressure, and that could be felt in why he was saying what he was saying, in trying to justify the actions, saying that if we do not do this, Russia would cease to exist. So either we exist, or
and what do the political observers have to say about this? What do the political observers have to say about it? And Putin will defend his actions to the people of Russia. What are the political observers saying about this? Because it almost seems like he's on this very defensive stance on his offensive.
Well, Chaiti, political observers in the beginning, when the war was beginning, and we'd speak with Russian experts over here, they themselves were a little shocked. Nobody expected this. But the longer it has dragged on, the more reasons now they've found to say why Russia had to do it or needed to do it. So within Russia, while there are varied opinions, while they still say that there could have been other options that could have been explored, now there is an increasing view that that if Russia would not have done this, then maybe Russia would have suffered with Ukraine moving the way Ukraine was moving. Now there are a few parameters to even join the NATO, or for that matter the European Union, and two very important ones in that are stability and democracy. if Ukraine was a stable country, if Ukraine was a democracy in the manner in which European Union and the West look at democratic worlds, Ukraine would have been a part of the European Union and the NATO. There were problems. The fact that the entire Eastern Front has had problems is the reason why they were not a part of the NATO. Russia pushed Ukraine with this action. Now the world knows, and Ukraine only realized it after entering the war, that NATO was not going to come to their rescue, Chaiti. So for political thinkers over here who initially thought that, well, did Putin do right with the people and with the country or not, are now saying that, well, look, NATO stands exposed, the West stands exposed, and an example over here again is, before I toss back to you, is the fact that when Finland now and Sweden are talking about joining the NATO, they want written assurances from the United States of America that should the procedure begin and should Russia do something, that they will actually come to Finland's rescue.
Right.
Ukraine did not have that assurance, not on paper, and is the reason why.
Point, and that's a very, very interesting point about what you brought forth as far as Finland is concerned as well, that they now want it in writing and want assurances from the West. As far as Ukraine's confidence is concerned as well, whether it is NATO, whether it is the Western nations or America particularly, I'm pretty sure that has been shaken as well. Geeta, hold on right there with us. Continue to be there with us. We're getting our viewers up to speed with the development, and I just want to tell our viewers, Geeta Mahone is live from Moscow. She's getting us second by second updates. This is the most anticipated speech, not just for Russia, but for the entire world as well. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered 75th day. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that 60 people who were sheltering in a school in Bilohorivka near the eastern city of Luhansk were killed when Russian forces bombed it this weekend. Following the relentless attacks on the port city of Mariupol, more than 170 civilians were successfully evacuated from Azovstal steelworks and have arrived in Zaporizhia. Drone footage being widely circulated by European media shows the Ukrainian Su-27 striking Russian facilities, causing serious damage on the famous Snake Island in Black Sea. The footage filmed by a TB2 drone, the Ukrainian S-300 missile system was also destroyed by Russian Surge rocket attack with cluster warheads. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military defeats 190 Russian troops, 15 tanks in eastern Ukraine on 8th of May. The East Operational and Tactical Group reported that 12 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 armored personnel carriers and 1 armored fighting vehicle, 1 MT-LB vehicle, 6 heavy artillery tractors, 1 fuel tank and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were also destroyed. And we're getting you all the very live updates coming in of the most anticipated speech from Moscow right there. And as Russia continues its onslaught on Ukraine, world leaders have even flocked to Ukraine. US First Lady Jill Biden made an unannounced visit to Ukraine after meeting refugee children and their mothers in Romania. Jill Biden visited a school in Romania's Bucharest, where she met the refugee children and their mothers. She was accompanied by the wife of President of Romania, Carmen Iohannis. Jill Biden also traveled to Ukraine in a surprise visit. She also ended up meeting Ukraine's First Lady, Olena, as Russia continued its onslaught on Ukraine. Jill Biden, after her visit, said that she wanted to go to Ukraine on Mother's Day to send out a message that the war had to stop and the people of the United States were standing in solidarity with Ukrainians. Same goes for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who made a surprise visit to Irpin that was damaged by Russian attacks. Justin Trudeau stood in solidarity with the Ukrainians. अरे किसी को PCR Russian forces fired cruise missiles at the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Saturday and bombarded a besieged steel mill in Mariupol, hoping to complete their conquest of the port in time for Victory Day celebrations. Ukraine announced that all women, children and older adults had been evacuated from the mill, a key Russian war objective. Let's bring you a complete report.
Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for over 2.5 months now. Putin's army fired a cruise missile at the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Saturday and bombarded the besieged steel mill in Mariupol. Hopeful to complete their conquest of the port city in time for Russian Victory Day celebrations on Monday. Amid raining missiles, shells and bombardments in Ukraine, Russia is marking 77 years of victory over Nazi Germany.
May 9th is a very important day after the surrender of Germany on the 8th of May. But the Soviet Union played a very important role in the defeat of Germany. But the message loud and clear, that's the Soviet banner. And the message this time around is going to be reminding the world, reminding Ukraine that they were part of the Soviet Union. It's uncanny and eerie that as Russia and many parts of Europe will be celebrating or marking the occasion of the end of World War II in Europe, the defeat of Germany, Russia is on the brink of yet another war. Will it lead to World War III is the big question.
Ukraine fears its troops still holed up in the Azovstal plant face massacre after the evacuation of all women, children and the elderly. Ukraine's military flattened Russian positions on a Black Sea island that was captured in the war's first days has now become a symbol of resistance.
This is the last place in Mariupol where Ukrainian forces are still, occupying. So it seems that in days to come, there will be an offensive launched by the Russian side on the Azovstal steel plant to flush out Ukrainian soldiers who are there.
Ukrainian counter-offensive is advancing around the second largest city, Kharkiv, a key target of the Russian shelling. Will the fall of Mariupol, timed with the day of biggest celebrations of Russian war capabilities, mark a decisive phase of the Ukrainian war? With Geeta Mahone in Moscow and Abhishek Bhalla in Kyiv, Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, Geeta Mahone joins us from Russia for all the very latest details. Geeta just told you about the 77th Victory Day. Even as the Ukraine war has entered the third month, she mentioned about Putin's address to the nation and encapsulated the key takeaways and deciphered what it really means. Geeta, as far as the latest updates are concerned, first tell us what is the sentiment in the people as far as this Victory Day speech is concerned, because the Russians are definitely impacted at this point of time, whether it is inflation or other issues.
Well, Chaiti, all major cities in Russia celebrate Victory Day. You can see people around quite excited. Since the morning, they've been here waiting. Not everybody is allowed to the Red Square because of security reasons. President Putin himself is there, and it's the reason why they're all here. But the parade is just getting over, and so the dignitaries are now leaving. But this parade has been held not just in Russia. It has also been held in Donbass, that's Donetsk and Luhansk. It has been held in Crimea in a very grand manner by the head of government there, who is one of the most sanctioned men in the world, Aksinov, who gave us an interview and said that Crimea is not going back to Ukraine. It has also been held at all the captured territories, that's Melitopol, Berdyansk, Energodar, which has the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And all of these areas have celebrated Victory Day today. So the people over here now are backing the country and the leadership, but when I speak to the youngsters, when I speak to others, there are many who are quite uncomfortable with the idea that Russia is an aggressor. They're uncomfortable with the idea that in 21st century there shouldn't be invaders. They're also uncomfortable with the idea that relations with Ukraine should not and could not have been spoiled to this extent. Why? Because both sides have familial ties. They have families on both sides of the border, and therefore, for many, this action completely is unacceptable. But beyond that, the speech of President Putin, which was being watched not just here in Russia but across the world to see what he had to say, was significant. He made a few very important points. It was concise. He did not go on and on about the Soviet Union, but yes, reminded the world and the people over here of the region that they were all one and they fought Nazi Germany and brought the world to victory when it comes to Europe particularly. He also spoke about the double standards and that same rules should apply to all when it comes to threat perceptions. He justified the action by talking about Kharkiv, Mariupol, the Donbas region, and speaking of liberation, which means that he is holding Ukraine responsible for discrimination against Russians within Ukraine. Now, there are legislations after the Minsk agreement was signed and not implemented, while Donbas region was seeking autonomy, Chaiti. Instead of giving Donbas region autonomy, the Ukrainian administration not so long ago had banned Russian as an official language. Now that certainly is discriminatory in a country where there's a huge population that's Russian origin or Russian speaking. So these legislations, these rules, these laws by the Ukrainian administration had not gone down well with the people, Russian-speaking people in eastern parts of Ukraine. And that certainly was used by Russia to mobilize forces and mobilize civilians into saying that, well, Ukraine is discriminatory. And therefore, the question about Ukraine joining the European Union or the NATO and being democratic. Ukraine did not in the recent past seem to be celebrating democracy or diversity, particularly so, by banning Russian as a language, official language in Ukraine. So these are areas that they also tapped into. They really tapped into the loopholes of discrimination that Russians thought they were facing or were facing in Ukraine. And that messaging came across when he spoke about people being one, that NATO's expansion into Ukraine is unacceptable, Ukraine going nuclear, absolutely unacceptable. And the pressure is on President Putin, not just because of the war and the isolation that Russia faces, but also because of the economic stress that the country will in some time start experiencing. Now, even if we talk about countries like India, Chaiti, who continue to do business with Russia, and they said, well, we look at our interests and we are not going to stop doing business. In that also, there have been logistics issues because shipments can't come through, given that most of the shipping industry belongs to countries in Europe or the West. So logistics is a huge issue. More importantly, some of the exporters that we were speaking to said that insurance has become a huge issue because Russia, despite the fact that the war is being fought in Ukraine and between Russia and Ukraine, but in Ukraine, it has not been fought in Russia. Russia has been declared war zone, and therefore insurances have become 15 times or 20 times higher. And many insurance companies are not insuring shipments to Russia. So while at this point in time, not many people are talking about these issues, but this economic pinch will soon be felt not just at the macro level, but at a micro level as well, when things become more expensive, dearer, and you'll see shortage of supply.
All right, Geeta, thanks so much for that perspective right there, and continue to be with us as you join us from Moscow with all the very latest perspective on the story as well. As the Ukraine war enters day 75, Vladimir Putin is marking Victory Day with a mega parade and speech in Moscow. Here is a look at the top defining images from this parade.
Russia sets its eyes on Ukraine's lifeline. Recent missile strikes on Odessa in Ukraine's south is fueling speculation about Russia's plan to take the strategic port on the Black Sea. Odessa, which connects Ukraine to the rest of the world, is being pounded with deadly missiles. The largely Russian-speaking city and the cultural hub has seen increased attacks by Moscow in recent weeks. On the 2nd of May, a teenage boy was killed and several injured in Russian strikes on a residential building.
The war between the armies might be restricted to some battle zones, but residential areas across Ukraine continue to get pounded by Russian missiles. Yet another fresh attack in Odessa, the all-important port town in south of Ukraine, which is strategically very important for Russia as well as Ukraine.
Ukrainian troops with their newly supplied military platforms have shifted tactics from defensive to offensive in the region. Ukrainian drones recently sank 2 Russian Petrol boats near the Black Sea Snake Island, indicating that the war is far from over. The destruction of the Russian Slava-class cruiser and the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Moskva, the 600-foot, 12,500-ton displacement, was a massive blow to the Russian Navy.
Russian operations in the Black Sea are being considered extremely significant, and the Ukrainian forces have put in all their resources to defend the Black Sea. It is apprehended that amphibious attacks are likely to take place from the Russian side. There is a huge fleet of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. There are about 24 warships, several submarines that are there in the Black Sea.
With fierce fighting in cities along Ukraine's southern coast, the key city of Odessa is preparing its defenses to protect the port city from an amphibious attack. On the Russian side, Moscow is strengthening its naval presence to break Kyiv's morale and resistance.
Can you give us a sense of what the situation has been in the south of Ukraine, especially the threat from the Russian side in the Black Sea? What kind of activities they have been up to?
The situation is stable and is under control. However, the Russian Federation still keeps the ships in the Black Sea, which is of threat to Ukraine. And the risk of rocket missiles launch is very high right now.
What kind of deployment do they have in the Black Sea?
The situation right now is dynamic and it changes all the time. But currently, they have several warships which keep the cruise missile on board, as well as several submarines.
Russians and Ukrainians fought together in the Second World War against the Nazi Germany. And this war memorial in Odessa is in memory of those who laid down their lives during the Second World War. And now this war memorial is even more significant as far as the Ukrainians are concerned. Especially the Ukrainian military says that this war memorial now represents the fight and the valor of the Ukrainian soldiers who are taking on the Russian assault. With camera person Parminder Sharma, this is Abhishek Bhalla in Odessa. for India Today.
Broadcast. Your voice is too loud. And the latest coming in right there, the big speech that everyone was waiting for, the whole world was waiting for. Putin marking Victory Day with Moscow military parade. The Russian leader linked his war in Ukraine with the Soviet Union's World War II triumph over Nazi Germany in a speech that blamed the West for the current conflict. And our reporters will be joining us in just about a bit. Let me just encapsulate what he said. He defended the invasion in the Victory Day speech. Putin said Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine. He also said Russia is fighting on its own soil. Putin has likened the invasion to Soviet fighting in World War II, and this was the most anticipated speech that the whole world was looking forward to. Russia was facing absolutely unacceptable threat in Ukraine, says Putin. He says Russian forces are defending their motherland in Ukraine. This is what Putin says. He also says and claims that Russia is fighting on its own soil. He says military action in Ukraine is timely and necessary response to Western policies, likened Russia's action in Ukraine to the Soviet fighting in World War II. Geeta Mahone now joins us live. Geeta, for our viewers who have just tuned in, and I know you've given us enough perspective and gotten us the complete overview of what is going on, but if you could just quickly encapsulate the top pointers of the Victory Day speech by Vladimir Putin, which is one of the most anticipated speeches all over the world.
Well, he made a very concise speech, but made the points that he wanted to put forth. There was a lot of speculation with regards to whether if Putin is going to declare war on Ukraine. That war, in terms of what they call special operation, is already special military operation is already underway. But what he did was to focus on a few areas of what they consider achievements. Now we know that there hasn't been a lot of significant gain, as reported by many, by Russia. But what is significant gain when territories have been taken in eastern parts of Ukraine, and with the kind of messaging that we saw from Putin, doesn't seem like that will be going back to Ukraine. So huge loss of land south of Dnieper River for Ukraine. Now what Vladimir Putin said in his speech is very important. One, he began by talking about Mariupol, the Donbas region, Kharkiv, very importantly talking about areas that are outside of Donbas and Crimea. Certainly means that these are areas that have been taken and will be very hard for Ukraine to reclaim. Secondly, he made a very important point on the reasons why they got into this war with Ukraine, what they call special military operations, why they had to really do that. This war, this invasion, this aggression is because NATO's expansion eastwards is a red line, not absolutely unacceptable, and was a non-negotiable term when it comes to talks with Ukraine. The other very important point he made was that Ukraine's talking about nuclear and the fact that they regret not having given up their nuclear arms, that they shouldn't have, and that they should be armed again, is a threat, an existential threat to Russia. So any aspect which is an existential threat is going to be a huge concern, and is the reason why Russia had to do what it did. He also spoke about the double standards of the West, comparing what their standards when it comes to their interests is vis-a-vis what Russian interests really are. And these are the areas that he wanted to focus on. But the most important point that he wanted to make, because today is the victory day of defeating Nazi Germany and finishing the war in Europe, finishing World War II in Europe, is the reason why he reminded people of the Soviet era, the role Soviet Union played, and the flags that you see of Soviet victory flag with the Russian flag are not just flying high across Russia. They're there in Donbas, they're there in Crimea, and Chathi, they're there in all captured territories beyond Donbas in Ukraine. So strong message going out there that they all fought together and that they need to stick together to ensure that Russia does not cease to exist.
Absolutely, Geeta, thanks for joining us with those details right there. Geeta Mahone getting us the latest from the Victory Day parade and encapsulating Putin's speech as well, bringing us the biggest takeaways from Vladimir Putin's speech. All eyes were in, globally, all eyes were on this particular speech in terms of what Putin is going to say. Putin marking Victory Day with Moscow military parade. He also spoke, he also linked his war in Ukraine with the Soviet Union's World War II triumph over Nazi Germany and blamed the West for the current conflict as well. He time and again kept mentioning Ukraine as their own motherland as well. We got you the latest details. We're also moving to the day 75 of the Russian invasion in just about a bit, and also juxtaposing this particular speech with exactly what is going on in Ukraine right now on the 75th day of the Russian invasion. In fact, we had reported earlier on India Today as to how Zelensky confirmed 60 people who were sheltering in a school near the eastern city of Luhansk were also killed when Russian forces bombed it. Following all those relentless attacks on the port city of Mariupol, more than 170 civilians were successfully evacuated from Azovstal steelworks and arrived in Zaporozhye. Now, dozens of people are feared dead after a Russian bomb attack destroyed a school in eastern Ukraine. The governor of Luhansk says about 90 people were hiding in the building when it was hit. Details in this report.
This is what's left of a school in Bilohorivka in the Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine. Russian forces bombed it. Nearly all the people who stayed in the village were hiding in this building when it was attacked. Dozens are feared dead.
Taking into account that it was an airstrike and not a simple artillery shelling. When the explosion happened, the temperature was extreme. Certainly our emergency workers will be clearing the debris with maximum speed, but there is only a very slim chance that anyone survived. But we hope for the best.
Since the war in Ukraine started, Russian forces have targeted hospitals, apartment blocks and other civilian buildings. The World Health Organization is gathering evidence for a possible war crimes investigation.
WHO has now verified 200 attacks on healthcare in Ukraine since the war began. These attacks must stop. Healthcare is never a target.
Ukraine's president says his country is fighting against a new form of Nazism. Volodymyr Zelenskiy was marking Victory in Europe Day. It's celebrated on the 8th of May, the date in 1945, when Nazi Germany surrendered.
Decades after World War II, darkness returned to Ukraine, and it became black and white again. Evils returned, again, in a different uniform, under different slogans, but for the same purpose. A bloody reconstruction of Nazism was organised in Ukraine, a fanatical repetition of this regime.
At the besieged steel plant in Mariupol, Ukraine's government says all civilians have been rescued. Civilians and soldiers had been trapped inside the Azovstal steel mill for nearly 2 months as Russian attacks intensified. And with the civilians now reportedly gone, it's the last holdout for Ukrainian fighters in the city. It's still unclear if President Putin will be able to declare victory in Mariupol in time for May the 9th, the day Russia celebrates the Soviet Union's World War II victory over the Nazis. But there is no doubt this anniversary won't mark the end of a conflict where both sides now invoke the battles of the 1940s. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
All right, getting you the very latest coming in from the Russia-Ukraine war at the moment, and also getting you a complete report of all that is happening on the Victory Day in Russia. Now, the report that we just ran was about dozens of people being feared dead after Russian bomb attack destroyed a school in eastern Ukraine. And in fact, you can see those visuals of the Ukrainian war continuing on the 4 windows that we've put up on your screens right now. The governor of Luhansk also said about 90 people were hiding in the building when it was hit. And of course, we just got you a report of all that is happening in Russia as well. Updates coming in from Moscow, I believe. Geeta, what do you have for us? Geeta, can you hear me? We re-establish that connection to Geeta. Mahone is just about a bit and get you the updates coming in from Moscow as well in Russia, where the Victory Day parade took place, and get you all the latest details of the military might which is on display, what really happened in the parade, encapsulate Putin's speech. We just did that for you. We're also juxtaposing this against the dozens of people who are feared dead after a Russian bomb attack destroyed a school in eastern Ukraine. The governor of Luhansk said about 90 people were hiding in the building when this was hit. That was the latest report that came in. We played that out for you viewers as well. We're getting you all those details from Moscow too. Geeta will be getting us the latest as far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, marking the Victory Day, celebrating the Soviet Union's World War II triumph over Nazi Germany with a grand display of the military might, visuals of which are running on your screens right now, and the address from Moscow's Red Square. The Russian leader linked his war in Ukraine with that historic struggle in a speech that blamed the West for this conflict, but contained new escalations. We're also getting you the Ukrainian side of the story, and we'll continue updating you in terms of what is happening as far as Ukraine is concerned, as the offensive is still going on in Ukraine. It is the 75 days of war, and the big question arising on whether Vladimir Putin has really even succeeded. And that's the ironic question we're asking, as Vladimir Putin has made that grand address marking the Victory Day with the Moscow military parade that was followed by a speech too. He linked his war in Ukraine with the Soviet Union's World War II triumph over Nazi Germany, and that speech blamed the West for the current conflict. Latest visuals coming in, you can see that grand display of military might in Russia right there. We'll also get you, Geeta, to join us with the latest that is coming in as far as the breaking news is concerned with Putin's speech that concluded. Putin has said that Russia fighting on its own soil. He's likened the invasion to Soviet fighting in World War II. The latest development coming in where Putin defends invasion in his Victory Day speech. And all of this as the offensive continues against Ukraine. He also says that Russia has faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine and that Russia is already fighting on its own soil. That's the latest coming in at the moment. We'll get you more in terms of where Ukraine stands to. What are the reactions of people in Russia as well, the problems people in Russia are facing on the back of this particular war. And many reports, actually, the ground reports, because remember viewers, our battery of reporters is they're all across Ukraine, they're all across Russia. They're getting us up to speed with the very latest development since the day one of the war and even before. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered the 25th day. Today, what you see on your screens and the visuals that we're playing are Russia showcasing their military might to the entire world. And you can see that parade on the Victory Day. And Putin also made a speech to the nations. It was the most anticipated speech that the entire world was waiting for. And just to give you a bit of a backgrounder in terms of the updates that we're getting in, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered the 75th day, and Zelensky confirmed that 60 people were sheltering in a school in the eastern city of Luhansk were killed when Russian forces bombed them this weekend. And you do know that there are these relentless attacks that are going on in the port city of Mariupol. More than 170 civilians were successfully evacuated from Azovstal steelworks and arrived in Zaporozhye as well. The drone footage was widely circulated by the European media, showing the Ukrainian Su-27 striking Russian facility, causing serious damage on the famous Snake Island in the Black Sea. The footage was filmed by a TB2 drone. We're getting you those 4 windows on your screens, of which one is focusing on the Ukrainian war that is still continuing, and the rest of the 3 windows show you how Russia's military might is on display. In fact, I was talking about the drone footage earlier. The Ukrainian S-300 missile system was also destroyed by a Russian smirched rocket attack with cluster warheads. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military has defeated 190 Russian troops, 15 tanks in eastern Ukraine on 8th of May. The East Operational and Tactical Group reported that 12 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 armored personnel carriers, 1 armored fighting vehicle, 1 MTLB vehicle, 6 heavy artillery tractors, 1 fuel tank and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were also destroyed.
Здравствуйте, товарищи! Поздравляю вас с 77-й годовщиной победы в Великой Отечественной войне!
Putin's address to the nation on Victory Day was the most watched event ever in the country. The Victory Day parade is one of the most significant events in Russia, and we're playing those visuals on your screens right now. It is held on 9th of May, which is today. It is marking the end of World War II in Europe with the defeat and surrender of the Nazi Germany on 8th May 1945. Moscow and many parts of Russia and Russian captured territories, including Mariupol, are going to witness, or rather are witnessing, celebrations of Victory Day. What is locally, in fact, what they call it is patriotic war. There in Russia, that's what they call it. President Vladimir Putin, in fact, most observers who we were speaking to, they expected him to use the occasion as a means to, declare a war, but that did not happen. What he did do, though, was to use this occasion as a means to promote patriotic unity, showcase the country's military might, which you can see on the screens right now. And you did see we just got you, our reporters got you the speech, and we got you the key takeaways of Putin's speech as well, where Putin went on to say that Russia was facing an absolutely unacceptable threat in Ukraine, and the Russian forces were defending their motherland in Ukraine. He also, in his speech, ended up claiming that Russia is fighting on its own soil, and said that Russia's military action in Ukraine is timely and necessary response to Western policies. That is what Russian President Vladimir Putin mentioned. He also likened Russia's action in Ukraine to Soviet fighting in World War II. He defended the invasion in his Victory Day speech. He said Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine. Russia fighting on its own soil is a remark that he made, and in his address to the nation, he likened the invasion to the Soviet fighting in World War II. Of course, as we're already telling you for a while now, it is the most anticipated speech of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russian President Vladimir Putin also said Russia's military action in Ukraine is timely and necessary response to the Western policies. We've got you covered. Our reporters are joining you from Moscow right there where this is going on. His most anticipated speech just concluded moments back, just moments back. That particular speech that everyone was waiting for concluded, and there was, in fact, most people felt that there would be some sort of an open declaration of war by Putin on Ukraine, but there was no open declaration by Putin as such on the Ukraine war. But he did go on to say that Russia was fighting on its own soil and faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine as well. In fact, let's get you visuals coming in from Ukraine too at the moment, because it's important to show our viewers. Can I request the producers to get us those visuals too? Can we get those visuals on our screens at the moment? Yes, there you go. You can see the Ukraine war continuing, Russian invasion of Ukraine entering 75th day. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirming that 60 people who were sheltering in a school near the eastern city of Luhansk were killed when Russian forces bombed it this weekend following the relentless attacks on the port city of Mariupol. More than 170 civilians successfully evacuated from Azovstal steelworks arrived in Zaporozhye. So that's the update coming in from Ukraine as well. Drone footage being widely circulated by European media showing Ukrainian Su-27 striking Russian facilities, causing serious damage on the famous Sank island in the Black Sea, and the footage was filmed by a TV-2 drone, and the S-300 missile system was also destroyed by a Russian smirched rocket attack with cluster warheads. Ukraine's military defeats 190 Russian troops, 15 tanks in eastern Ukraine on 8th of May. The East Operational and Tactical Group reported that 12 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 armored personnel carriers, 1 armored fighting vehicle, 1 MT-LB vehicle, 6 heavy artillery tractors, 1 fuel tank and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were also destroyed. In fact, now that we're showing you the Victory Day parade visuals again, listen in. Geeta Mahone is joining us live for the very latest. Geeta, is the parade over? Is all of the parade that we see on our screens, all of that is done with? What's the latest that is coming in at the moment, Geeta?
Well, Chaiti, the parade at the Red Square is over. But the parade is not completely over, because we will see the regiments now, the columns move in the street of
the Red Square, which was the parade. So that is the immortal regiment, which in some time from now, they will start the procession. Now, the immortal regiment is a very important tradition that has begun in Russia. Across major cities in Russia, people take out long processions with photographs of their loved ones, fathers, relatives.
Fathers, relatives who served and gave their life in the is going
again is to immortalize the memory of those who sacrificed their lives. That is not the soldiers, the Frenchmen, laborers, anybody and everyone who played an important role or played a part in the Second World War. That is going to be in some kind of, and at night there will be fireworks. So it is a whole day's affair. Parade and the rest fair is over. After the columns will move on the street, after which there will be the important regiment procession, and then link to the night fireworks.
No, you're asking for.
Geeta is getting us all the very latest details as the Ukraine war continues on the other side. The military might is on display and the Victory Day parade is also going on. Geeta, at the moment, where do things stand as far as the invasion is continuing in Ukraine? Geeta, can you hear me? Geeta?
Chetty, I can hear you now. Could you repeat your question?
I'm saying that while we're talking about the Victory Day parade and the fact that it concluded, and we did bring our viewers all the top points of what Putin has spoken in the Victory Day parade. As far as the Russian invasion on Ukraine is concerned, where does it stand at the moment?
Well, the Russian invasion and the agenda, the goals, have not been met. A few areas people want under its control, but a lot of parts of Ukraine are under Russian control, and they are not. We are not talking about Donetsk, Luhansk, which Russia has declared independent republics, or Crimea that Russia annexed in 2014 and is now part of Russian territory or federation. Talking about those areas, we're talking about areas that have been captured and are beyond Donbass, or for that matter Crimea, and that is going to be a huge point of contention between Ukraine and Russia. President Putin making it very clear that by mentioning these areas and these that it is a very important territory and it is a very important area. So that certainly is going to be one that the Russian president and President Putin emphasized on. He's also.
But should that happen, Chet? Should Ukraine finally join the NATO? Then this is the buffer areas, eastern Ukraine, that Russia will never let go of, because this will be buffer zone for Russia between a country that is now a NATO member and Russia. Donbass region particularly was created for that very purpose and that very reason, but it's only a small area of land between Russia and Ukraine. If Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Kherson, Odessa, Zaporizhia, if these areas in eastern parts come under Russian control, then one, there will be no land boundary between Russia and NATO Ukraine. And more importantly, if Odessa falls, then Ukraine will not only lose a port, will stands to lose its navy, and Russia will gain a critical port infrastructure.
So, requesting Geeta to get re-established on this broadcast. Geeta, we're having some trouble with the audio. And if the producers, if you can hear me, please re-establish Geeta on this particular broadcast. She's getting us all the very latest details. There's some issue with the sound. We're fixing that in just about moments from now. We're getting you the latest details as far as Putin's most anticipated speech is concerned. We just concluded. There was no open declaration by Putin on Ukraine war, although most observers felt that there would be some sort of a declaration or a statement that would be made by Putin on Ukraine war. Putin said Russia is fighting on its own soil and also said Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine. We're getting you those latest details on how Putin defended invasion in the Victory Day speech, and Russia facing unacceptable threat in Ukraine. Also, Russia fighting on its own soil and likened the invasion to Soviet fighting in World War II. It is the most anticipated speech of Vladimir Putin, and Geeta is getting you all the latest updates from Ukraine as well. Do we have Geeta with us? All right, Geeta is going to be joining us in short moments from now, and she's also going to get us the latest details as far as Ukraine is concerned. The Russian invasion of Ukraine entering 75th day. Ukrainian President Zelenskiy confirming that 60 people who were sheltering in a school near eastern city of Luhansk were killed when Russian forces bombed it this weekend. Following the relentless attacks on the port city of Mariupol, more than 170 civilians were successfully evacuated from the Azovstal steelworks and arrived in Zaporizhia. Drone footage being widely circulated by European media showing the Ukrainian Su-27 striking Russian facilities, causing serious damage on the famous Snake Island on the Black Sea. The footage filmed by a TB2 drone. The Ukrainian S-300 missile system was also destroyed by a Russian smerged rocket attack with cluster warheads. Ukraine's military defeating 190 Russian troops, 15 tanks in eastern Ukraine on 8th of May. East Operational and Tactical Group reported 12 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 armored personnel carriers and 1 armored fighting vehicle, 1 MTLB vehicle, 6 heavy artillery tractors, 1 fuel tank and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were also destroyed. That's the latest coming in at the moment. We'll get you more details, we'll get you more elements as well of what is going on. The Russian onslaught continues on Ukraine. World leaders have also flocked to Ukraine. We'll get you those visuals as well. But I believe Geeta is back with us. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered its 75th day, and Zelensky confirmed that 60 people who were sheltering in a school near the eastern city of Luhansk were killed when Russian forces bombed it this weekend. Following the relentless attacks on the port city of Mariupol, more than 170 civilians were successfully evacuated from the Azovstal steelworks and have arrived in Zaporizhia. Drone footage being widely circulated by European media showed the Ukrainian Su-27 striking Russian facilities, causing serious damage on the famous Snake Island in the Black Sea. The footage filmed by TB2 drone. Ukrainian's S-300 missile system was also destroyed by Russian smerged rocket attack with cluster warheads. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military defeats 190 Russian troops, 15 tanks in eastern Ukraine on 8th of May. The East Operational and Tactical Group reported that 12 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 armored personnel carriers, 1 armored fighting vehicle and 1 MTLB vehicle, 6 heavy artillery tractors, 1 fuel tank and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were also destroyed. Russian forces fired cruise missiles at the southern Ukraine city of Odessa on Saturday and bombarded a besieged steel mill in Mariupol, hoping to complete their conquest of port in time for the Victory Day celebrations. Ukraine announced that all women, children and older adults had been evacuated from the mill, a key Russian war objective. Here is a report coming.
Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for over 2.5 months now. Putin's army fired a cruise missile at the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Saturday and bombarded the besieged steel mill in Mariupol. Hopeful to complete their conquest of the port city in time for Russian Victory Day celebrations on Monday. Amid raining missiles, shells and bombardments in Ukraine, Russia is marking 77 years of victory over Nazi Germany.
May 9th is a very important day after the surrender of Germany on the 8th of May. But the Soviet Union played a very important role in the defeat of Germany. But the message loud and clear, that's the Soviet banner. And the message this time around is going to be reminding the world, reminding Ukraine that they were part of the Soviet Union. It's uncanny and eerie that as Russia and many parts of Europe will be celebrating or marking the occasion of the end of World War II in Europe, the defeat of Germany, Russia is on the brink of yet another war. Will it lead to World War III is the big question.
Ukraine fears its troops still holed up in the Azovstal plant face massacre after the evacuation of all women, children and the elderly. Ukraine's military flattened Russian positions on a Black Sea island that was captured in the war's first days has now become a symbol of resistance.
This is the last place in Mariupol where Ukrainian forces are still, occupying. So it seems that in days to come, there will be an offensive launched by the Russian side on the Azovstal steel plant to flush out Ukrainian soldiers who are there.
Ukrainian counter-offensive is advancing around the second largest city, Kharkiv, a key target of the Russian shelling. Will the fall of Mariupol, timed with the day of biggest celebrations of Russian war capabilities, mark a decisive phase of the Ukrainian war? With Geeta Mahone in Moscow and Abhishek Bhalla in Kyiv, Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, Geeta Mahone joins us for the very latest details in just about a bit. She's just getting patched on this particular broadcast. She is reporting from Moscow, getting us the latest details as Russia continues its onslaught on Ukraine. In fact, there are world leaders who have flocked to Ukraine as well, showing their solidarity. Canada has shown their solidarity with Ukraine. You have America showing solidarity with Ukraine. And we'll get you, Geeta, in just about a bit to bring us up to speed with the very latest. She's joining us just in moments from now. She's right there in Moscow. She's going to explain what this means for India as well. The speech that was made by Vladimir Putin, his Victory Day speech, very important speech, and what this means for India too. A geopolitical bird's eye view is what our foreign affairs editor will get you, because she's joining us live from Moscow on this particular story. Russian forces, remember, have also been attacking Odessa, fueling speculation that Russia might want to take the strategic port on the Black Sea as well. There is an attack on Mariupol too. Russian forces firing cruise missiles at southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Saturday, bombarding besieged steel mill in Mariupol, hoping to complete conquest of the port in time for Victory Day celebrations. Ukraine announcing all women, children and older adults evacuated from the mill, and that we're getting you all that is happening in Ukraine as well. Also getting you the offensive of Russia on Ukraine in the third month, right as Russia celebrates 77th Victory Day, despite the Ukrainian war being in its third month. Putin address to the nation on Victory Day is the most watched event of the country, one of the most significant events in Russia, held on 9th of May, marking the end of World War II in Europe with the defeat and surrender of Nazi Germany on 8th May 1945. Moscow and many parts of Russia and Russian captured territories, including Mariupol, going to witness celebrations of Victory Day, or what is locally called the Patriotic War. Putin expected to use occasion as a means to promote patriotic unity and showcase the country's military might. Amongst the pro-war additions, a group of fighter jets expected to fly over central Moscow in the shape of a Z, a popular symbol of support for Russian troops in Ukraine. According to Russia's defense ministry, 129 vehicles and 10,000 personnel this year. In total, you have 11,000 people, 131 units of industrial special equipment and 77 aircraft and helicopters who are going to be taking part in this.
Товарищ министр обороны Российской Федерации, войска Московского гарнизона для парада вознаменования 77-й годовщины Победы в Великой Отечественной войне построены командующий парадом генерал армии Салюков.
Pictures from the Victory Day parade at Red Square in Moscow. It's an annual event, but this year it assumes a great amount of significance given Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the 24th day of February, marking 3 months ever since Russia invaded Ukraine. Pictures of Russian President Vladimir Putin right now at the Victory Day parade. Live on your screens. Victory Day parade, remember, is one of the most significant events in Russia, and this year all eyes are on the parade given the volatile situation in this region. It marks the end of World War II, remember, in Europe, interestingly, that was fought by Ukraine and Russia together as part of the Soviet Union. This day commemorates the surrender of Nazi Germany. Moscow and many parts of Russia and Russian captured territories, including Mariupol, are witnessing these celebrations of Victory Day. Locally, it is known as the Patriotic Day. And as Ukraine war enters day 75, Vladimir Putin is marking the Victory Day with a mega parade and speech in Moscow. Here's a look at the top defining images from this parade. Nuclear missiles and high-tech armaments marched onto the streets of Moscow. Thermonuclear RS-24 Yas ballistic missile, which experts believe can carry up to 10 warheads, grabbed center stage. This intercontinental weapon weighs 49.6 tons and has a range of 12,000 kilometers and can cruise at speeds of up to 24,500 kilometers per hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin shakes hands with spectators before a military parade on Victory Day, which marks the 77th anniversary of the victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. Putin's public appearance came at a time when there were reports suggesting that he was undergoing some treatment for cancer. Russian military might was on full display at the Victory Day parade. A Russian self-propelled artillery vehicle, MSTAS, was seen rolling on the streets of Moscow. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the Russian Land Forces Oleg Salyukov drove Oris cabriolets during a military parade. This year's parades aim to justify Russia's war in Ukraine, which has gone on longer and cost more than Moscow expected. The airborne part of the military parade on Moscow's Red Square was cancelled due to unfavorable weather. It was intended to involve 77 fixed and rotary wing aircraft to represent the number of years that have passed since the end of 1941 to 1945, the period marking the Great Patriotic War. Vladimir Putin defending his invasion of Ukraine in his Victory Day speech at Moscow's Red Square today. Putin tied the Ukraine invasion to Second World War, saying the Russian soldiers were fighting for the same thing their fathers and grandfathers did. The Russian president launched a defense of his war in Ukraine, pivoting from recognition of Russia's greatest generation to a description of how Ukraine was being armed by the West for an imminent attack on Crimea. Putin suggested Russia was forced into the war by NATO and pledged to provide aid for the families of soldiers who had died in what the Kremlin is calling a special operation. Pictures from the Red Square in Moscow where the Victory Day parade is on. We also heard from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has spoken about the special operation against Ukraine. He also spoke about Ukraine being armed by the West for an imminent attack on Crimea, something that he said in the past as well. He says that Russia was forced into the war by NATO, and he's also made a pledge to provide aid for the families of soldiers who died in what the Kremlin is calling as a special operation, referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. Putin has defended his invasion of Ukraine in the Victory Day speech at Moscow's Red Square. He tied the Ukraine invasion to the Second World War, saying the Russian soldiers were fighting for the same thing their fathers and grandfathers had fought for. The Russian president has launched a defense of his war in Ukraine, pivoting from recognition of Russia's greatest generation to a description of how Ukraine was being armed by the West for an imminent attack on Crimea. Putin suggested Russia was forced into the war by NATO, pledging to provide aid for the families of soldiers who died in what the Kremlin is calling a special operation. Pictures of the Victory Day parade at Russia's Moscow. This is at the Red Square where the annual event takes place every single year. Putin in a way has revived the tradition of the Victory Day parade from the year 1995 onwards. Remember, Russia is celebrating its 77th Victory Day even as the Ukraine war has entered its third month. Putin's address to the nation on Victory Day, which has happened, has been the most watched event in the country. It is in fact the most significant event in Russia, held on the 9th of May year after year. It marks the end of the Second World War in Europe with the defeat of Nazi Germany. Today, the military might of Russia is on display. Now, talking about the Victory Day parade, it is held on the 9th of every May each year, marking the end of the Second World War in Europe with the defeat and surrender of Nazi Germany that took place in the year 1945 on the 8th of May. Celebrations of the Victory Day parade are being keenly watched in Ukraine as well. It is locally known as the Patriotic War. As expected, Putin has used this occasion as a means to promote patriotic unity and also justify the invasion of Ukraine, which he chooses to call a special operation. Putin has spoken about the involvement of the West in Ukraine, the manner in which Ukraine is being armed, and justified the reasons why Russia had to undertake the special operation of Ukraine, which the world is looking as an invasion of the neighboring country of Ukraine. Remember, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered its 75th day. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has spoken about people who have died in a school in Bilohorivka near the eastern city of Luhansk. This even as Russia marks its Patriotic Day today. This is an annual event in Russia and is commemorated year after year at the Red Square in Moscow, the capital of Russia.
Vladimir Putin, in fact, earlier today spoke about the need to intervene as far as Russia's special operation in Ukraine is concerned, talking about the interference of NATO countries, pretty much indicating that it was the West that had forced Russia's hands on this one. Putin has also, in fact, spoken about the fact that those who, in fact, have died in the war in Ukraine will be compensated adequately by Russia. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered its 75th day, and we're talking about an attack in Ukraine, in Luhansk, that has killed 60 people. These were the people who were taking shelter in a school in the eastern city of Luhansk. They were killed when Russian forces bombed it this weekend. Following the relentless attacks in the port city of Mariupol, a strategic port city, more than 170 civilians were successfully evacuated from the Azovstal steelworks and have arrived in Zaporizhia. Drone footage being widely circulated by the European press shows the Ukrainian Su-27 striking Russian facilities, causing serious damage on the famous Snake Island in the Black Sea. The footage filmed by a TB2 drone. The Ukrainian S-300 missile system was also destroyed by a Russian Smerch rocket attack with cluster warheads. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military defeats 190 Russian troops, 15 tanks in eastern Ukraine on the 8th of May. The East Operational and Tactical Group reported that 12 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 armored personnel carriers, 1 armored fighting vehicle, 1 MTLB vehicle, 6 heavy artillery tractors, 1 fuel tank, and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were also destroyed. As Russia continues its onslaught on Ukraine, world leaders flock Ukraine. US First Lady Jill Biden made an unannounced visit to Ukraine after meeting refugee children and their mothers in Romania. Jill Biden visited a school in Romania's Bucharest, where she met the children, refugee children and their mothers. She was accompanied by wife of the President of Romania, Carmen Iohannis. Biden also traveled to Ukraine in a surprise visit and met Ukraine's First Lady Volodymyr Zelenskiy as Russia continued its onslaught on Ukraine. Jill Biden, after her visit, said she wanted to go to Ukraine on Mother's Day to send out a message that this war had to stop and that the people of the United States were standing in solidarity with the Ukrainians. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also made a surprise visit to Irpin, which was damaged by Russian attacks previously. Trudeau stood in solidarity with the Ukrainians. Our Foreign Affairs Editor Geeta Mahone is in Moscow tracking all of those details. And Geeta, we've been talking about this for days together. The Russian president using this as an opportunity clearly to send out a message that this was a special operation that was much required and that pretty much Russia's hands were forced into it. That was done by the West.
Well, that's right. That's the message of President Putin, that he had no other option, that this operation was required, that this invasion was a necessity because Russia's security was under threat. But the reasons that he's given are not just about NATO expansion, also about Ukraine wanting to go nuclear. Again, another existential threat, and reminding the people over here of the entire region that they were all a part of the Soviet Union that fought Nazi Germany. So a lot of messaging today in terms of why he did it. But the most significant one was the fact that he began by naming areas that are outside of Donbass and Crimea, Kharkiv, for example, talking about the operations over there, and certainly in a way the messaging of how these areas are critical and important to Russia. And the big question remaining, Sneha, would these areas be returned to Ukraine? Should there be a negotiated settlement between the two sides? Or will they also be created as separate entities, regions, as a buffer between Ukraine and Russia? that certainly is not just a concern for Ukraine, but in the end game, there's a huge loss of land for Ukraine should the area not be returned.
You know, Geeta, there was a lot of speculation whether the Russian president is essentially going to give an indication about the trajectory of what next, about the war per se, the invasion per se. Does it look like at all to you that Russia, by claiming victory, is going to back off anytime soon? What do you make of what Vladimir Putin said today?
Well, there is no backing off over here, while there was no claiming victory per se, because the gains have not been have been significant, but not exactly how Russia had planned it to be. The important part over here is that the Russian president has put out a very strong signal with regards to what they really want. Did they ever want the whole of Ukraine? We do not really know, because after the Istanbul meeting, they themselves decided to withdraw troops from Kyiv. It was not like they were pushed out of Kyiv, but they started withdrawing troops from Kyiv. And the eastern parts, they continue to hold very strongly. So the messaging over here in terms of Russia's plans, to me, looked very clear, Sneha, in saying that the eastern parts are now a part of Russia, that Russia is fighting the war in its own motherland, which means that they consider this entire area, swath of land in eastern part of Ukraine, not very away from the idea of being a part, an integral part of Russia. And if that is the plan, it is going according to the way they want it. The timelines may differ, and if it gets prolonged, it could hurt Russia a lot. The isolation of Russia in itself is hurting Russia to quite an extent. Economy, while within, if you come to this country, does not look like a country that is under sanctions. Things are working smoothly, but that is also because, Sneha, Russia has learned to live with sanctions. Although this time around, the sanctions are very harsh. So at some point in time, those sanctions and the pinch of those sanctions will start being felt. But if it is prolonged, if not, if the two sides come to a negotiated settlement, how will that settlement look if the Russian president is claiming victory or talking about the necessity of liberating, quote unquote, liberating areas beyond Donbass and Crimea? If that is the case, then we already have traveled to those captured territories. There's already de-Ukrainization and Russianization of those areas. Would they hold referendums? Most of the acting mayors or mayors placed by Russia have already said that they're looking at referendum. The areas are also primarily Russian-speaking areas. So a huge question on what is really going to happen with these captured territories. With what the president said today, it seems quite clear that there is no intention of returning these parts of eastern Ukraine to Ukraine.
Geeta, be with us. Just coming back to you in a moment from now. We're talking about Russian forces now firing cruise missiles at the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Saturday, and the manner in which bombardment has happened. A besieged steel mill in Mariupol has been bombarded, with Russia hoping to complete their conquest of the port on time for Victory Day celebrations. That does not look possible though. Ukraine announced that all women, children and older adults had been evacuated from the mill, a key Russian war objective. There's more.
Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for over 2.5 months now. Putin's army fired a cruise missile at the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Saturday and bombarded the besieged steel mill in Mariupol. Hopeful to complete their conquest of the port city in time for Russian Victory Day celebrations on Monday. Amid raining missiles, shells and bombardments in Ukraine, Russia is marking 77 years of victory over Nazi Germany.
May 9th is a very important day after the surrender of Germany on the 8th of May. But the Soviet Union played a very important role in the defeat of Germany. But the message loud and clear, That's the Soviet banner. And the message this time around is going to be reminding the world, reminding Ukraine that they were part of the Soviet Union. It's uncanny and eerie that as Russia and many parts of Europe will be celebrating or marking the occasion of the end of World War II in Europe, the defeat of Germany, Russia is on the brink of yet another war. Will it lead to World War III is the big question.
Ukraine fears its troops still holed up in the Azovstal plant face massacre after the evacuation of all women, children and the elderly. Ukraine's military flattened Russian positions on a Black Sea island that was captured in the war's first days has now become a symbol of resistance.
This is the last place in Mariupol where Ukrainian forces are still, occupying. So it seems that in days to come, there will be an offensive launched by the Russian side on the Azovstal steel plant to flush out Ukrainian soldiers who are there.
Ukrainian counter-offensive is advancing around the second largest city, Kharkiv, a key target of the Russian shelling. Will the fall of Mariupol, timed with the day of biggest celebrations of Russian war capabilities, mark a decisive phase of the Ukrainian war? With Geeta Mahone in Moscow and Abhishek Bhalla in Kyiv, Bureau Report, India Today.
Mahone continues to be with us on that big story from Moscow. Geeta, once again, do take us through the biggest takeaway really from Vladimir Putin's speech today, in which he went all out defending Russia's invasion of Ukraine, calling it a special operation and really indicating that this is basically defense of the motherland, comparing this to what had been done by the ancestors of the current soldiers in Ukraine from Russia by their grandfathers and their forefathers just 80 years ago.
Well, that's right. The message, again, loud and clear, reasserting the idea of Soviet Union, reminding them that they were all one in fighting the Second World War. It comes at an opportune time, May 9th, Victory Day. This year has been different because the reassertion has been felt in every way possible, Sneha, whether it is the flags, where you see not just Russian flags, but the Soviet victory flags, whether if you see St. George's ribbon everywhere, that again talks about the military valor, the Russian military valor, or for that matter, the idea of Soviet Union and them coming together. All that was spelled out in President Putin's speech, and President Putin made it very clear that in order to ensure that Russia continues to exist, that it's a proxy war that West is fighting with Russia and using Ukraine in order to ensure that Russia does not cease to exist. This was a needed operation. This was a needed war. Nobody can justify the invasion or the loss of life. We've seen a tremendous amount of loss when it comes to civilians, deaths. No leader can justify that. But yes, the longer the war continues, we are in the third month, the more difficult it will become for Russia to sustain. So the timelines don't match, but when it comes to the strategy and what Russia wants south of Dnieper, they certainly have gained a lot of ground and they're holding on. So unless and until there is some a fillip to the kind of military action that we're seeing from the Ukrainian side, it seems like this area will certainly remain under Russian control, and that was spelled out very clearly by the Russian president. So a lot of reassertion of the idea of being a part of the Soviet Union, and the fact that over here he made a very significant statement, Sneha, which you very rightly pointed out. He said that they're fighting the war for their motherland, in their motherland, which means not considering these areas as not a part of Russia. So that is a very significant statement coming from Putin.
Geeta, be with us. Just coming back to you in a few moments. Let's talk about the Russian forces that has been attacking Odessa, fueling speculation that they might want to take the strategic port on the Black Sea. Here's more.
Russia sets its eyes on Ukraine's lifeline. Recent missile strikes on Odessa in Ukraine's south is fueling speculation about Russia's plan to take the strategic port on the Black Sea. Odessa, which connects Ukraine to the rest of the world, is being pounded with deadly missiles. The largely Russian-speaking city and the cultural hub has seen increased attacks by Moscow in recent weeks. On the 2nd of May, a teenage boy was killed and several injured in Russian strikes on a residential building.
The war between the armies might be restricted to some battle zones, but residential areas across Ukraine continue to get pounded by Russian missiles. Yet another fresh attack in Odessa, the all-important port town in south of Ukraine, which is strategically very important for Russia as well as Ukraine.
Ukrainian troops with their newly supplied military platforms have shifted tactics from defensive to offensive in the region. Ukrainian drones recently sank 2 Russian petrol boats near the Black Sea Snake Island, indicating that the war is far from over. The destruction of the Russian Slava-class cruiser and the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Moskva, the 600-foot, 12,500-ton displacement, was a massive blow to the Russian Navy.
Russian operations in the Black Sea are being considered extremely significant, and the Ukrainian forces have put in all their resources to defend the Black Sea. It is apprehended that amphibious attacks are likely to take place. From the Russian side, there is a huge fleet of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. There are about 24 warships, several submarines that are there in the Black Sea.
With fierce fighting in cities along Ukraine's southern coast, the key city of Odessa is preparing its defenses to protect the port city from an amphibious attack. On the Russian side, Moscow is strengthening its naval presence to break Kyiv's morale and resistance.
Can you give us a sense of what the situation has been in the south of Ukraine, especially the threat from the Russian side in the Black Sea? What kind of activities they have been up to?
The situation is stable and is under control. However, the Russian Federation still keeps the ships in the Black Sea, which is of threat to Ukraine. And the risk of rocket missiles launch is very high right now.
What kind of deployment do they have in the Black Sea?
The situation right now is dynamic and it changes all the time. But currently, they have several warships which keep the cruise missile on board, as well as several submarines.
Russians and Ukrainians fought together in the Second World War against the Nazi Germany. And this war memorial in Odessa is in memory of those who laid down their lives during the Second World War. And now this war memorial is even more significant as far as the Ukrainians are concerned. Especially the Ukrainian military says that this war memorial now represents the fight and the valor of the Ukrainian soldiers who are taking on the Russian assault. With camera person Parminder Sharma, this is Abhishek Bhalla in Odessa for India Today.
Mahone continues to be with us from Moscow. Geeta, even as the Victory Day parade is being marked, give us an overview of the current situation in Ukraine. Even after so many days, Kyiv stands tall. This is not a war that Russia expected. They didn't expect this to be prolonged for such a long time, isn't it?
Well, that certainly is the case. The strategists over here certainly feel like the war should not have been, or they did not anticipate that it would be prolonged and that it will carry on for this long. This is the 3rd month we're looking at. In modern times, a war that goes on for beyond 2 months is unthinkable because of the cost of war, not just in terms of ammunition, weapons, but in terms of how it hits an economy. While Russia, because it has been sanctioned for so many years, is insulated when it comes to domestic economy, And that's why when you see people over here, you really don't feel or you don't get a sense of this country being absolutely at war with another country. But at a macro level, there is going to be a huge impact when it comes to import, export, doing business, international trade. How many countries are really going to trade with Russia? And the gas economy as well. While Russia is an important gas economy and a gas provider, there are countries that are looking at stopping or halting gas sooner than later. So while again Russia does have time, we will have to wait and see whether if they're going to continue taking gas next year, next winter as well or not. And in that, this prolonged war is taking a toll on the economy over here. And countries that want to do business with Russia, like India, also are not being able to do it as smoothly because of the sanctions. A lot of logistics problems with import and export. Insurance companies are not insuring the shipments, and shipments don't move without insurance. They're not insuring because Russia has been declared war zone. So there are a lot of issues and problems that will start being felt if and should the war continue, Sneha. So there's tremendous amount of pressure on Putin to end the war sooner than later. How it ends, how they're going to do it, will there be negotiations, is something we'll have to wait and see. But the statement that he made today and the announcements that he made with regards to captured territories beyond Donbass and Crimea certainly is an indicator that Russia is not willing to give up the land that has been captured. And if that is the case, then this area will remain conflict zone for a very long time to come.
Geeta, be with us. Just coming back to you. Dozens of people, meanwhile, are feared dead after a Russian bomb attack destroyed a school in eastern Ukraine. The governor of Luhansk has said about 90 people were hiding in the building when it was hit. Here's more.
This is what's left of a school in Bilohorivka in the Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine. Russian forces bombed it. Nearly all the people who stayed in the village were hiding in this building when it was attacked. Dozens are feared dead.
Taking into account that it was an airstrike and not a simple artillery shelling, when the explosion happened, the temperature was extreme. Certainly our emergency workers will be clearing the debris with maximum speed, but there is only a very slim chance that anyone survived. But we hope for the best.
Since the war in Ukraine started, Russian forces have targeted hospitals, apartment blocks and other civilian buildings. The World Health Organization is gathering evidence for a possible war crimes investigation.
WHO has now verified 200 attacks on healthcare in Ukraine since the war began. These attacks must stop. Healthcare is never a target.
Ukraine's president says his country is fighting against a new form of Nazism. Volodymyr Zelenskiy was marking Victory in Europe Day. It's celebrated on the 8th of May, the date in 1945, when Nazi Germany surrendered.
Decades after World War II, darkness returned to Ukraine, and it became black and white again. Evils returned, again, in a different uniform, under different slogans, but for the same purpose. A bloody reconstruction of Nazism was organised in Ukraine, a fanatical repetition of this regime.
At the besieged steel plant in Mariupol, Ukraine's government says all civilians have been rescued. Civilians and soldiers have been trapped inside the Azovstal steel mill for nearly 2 months as Russian attacks intensified. And with the civilians now reportedly gone, it's the last holdout for Ukrainian fighters in the city. It's still unclear if President Putin will be able to declare victory in Mariupol in time for May the 9th, the day Russia celebrates the Soviet Union's World War II victory over the Nazis. But there is no doubt this anniversary won't mark the end of a conflict where both sides now invoke the battles of the 1940s. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
Well, these were the details that we were getting you from Russia's much talked about Victory Day Parade, which is in fact an annual event. This year's Victory Day Parade assumes a great amount of significance given the Russian invasion of Ukraine 3 months ago, marking the beginning of the special operation, like Putin chose to call it, on the 24th day of February. Today, Russia's might was on display, as you can see in these pictures coming in from Red Square in Moscow. The Russian tanks rolling on the streets of Moscow today. This always is the case, but like I said, today's Victory Day parade assumes more significance given the attack on Ukraine. Putin, of course, defended invasion in his Victory Day speech, speaking about how Russia faced unacceptable threat in Ukraine. Also spoke about how Russia is fighting on its own soil. He likened the invasion to the Soviet fighting in World War II. Time now for our special show, The Battle Cry, with my colleague Shivaru. Stay on for that.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Battle Cry. The world's #1 defense story is still very much what's happening in Ukraine. It's the third month of what is unfolding as a truly brutal military conflict in that country. And India today, as you know, has been reporting it more extensively and deeper than anyone else in India and pretty much anyone else in the world. Our teams are still down there, but here's the point. As we bring you this new episode, things have entered a decisive phase. Russia has been using long-range caliber cruise missiles to hit targets in Ukraine quite extensively right through this conflict. They've been launched from land launchers, they've also been launched from ship. But now with land missile positions as well as Russian ships in the Black Sea rendered pretty vulnerable thanks to pinpointed attacks by Ukrainian defenses, the Russians have brought in their submarines, which are much less vulnerable than ships or land launchers because they lurk beneath the waves and can strike when nobody is really expecting it. Take a look at how submarines have entered the combat mix now. A pair of Russian caliber cruise missiles breaking the surface of the Black Sea to the south of Ukraine and blasting into the sky, headed towards unknown targets in the war-torn country. The missiles launched from beneath the waves by a Russian Kilo-class submarine. The footage you're looking at, released officially by the Russian government this week, captures what is believed to be the first use of submarine-launched weapons in this conflict so far. Caliber cruise missiles have been used extensively by Russia so far, but have mostly been launched from surface ships. These missiles, with ranges that run into hundreds of kilometers or more, have been used to target several Ukrainian cities, especially in the southern part of the country. Ukraine's military headquarters claimed this week that 3 Russian military boats armed with Caliber cruise missiles are currently roaming the Black Sea, awaiting target data to escalate strikes on Ukrainian territory. But Russian ships and boats have been rendered vulnerable in the days gone by, thanks to precision drone strikes being brought to the fight by the Ukrainian Navy. And that's possibly why Russia has now begun using its much less vulnerable, stealthy submarines to conduct similar land attack missions using these caliber long-range cruise missiles. In fact, recent satellite imagery from Maxar shows the loading of missiles onto what is believed to be a Kilo-class submarine in the Black Sea port of Sevastopol in Crimea, a location India Today has been reporting from.
Sevastopol naval base, one of the most important naval bases for Russia, a warm water naval base. You can see the ships behind me very clearly. This is one of the most important strategic positions for Russia. This is where they have a stronghold over the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, and Crimea becomes very important because of this infrastructure, critical infrastructure for Russia, and Russia is controlling waters around the Black Sea in this region because of this very important naval base.
The question now is, can Ukraine battle Russia's undersea fleet? Does Ukraine have the capability to target Russian submarines effectively? Will Ukrainian cities now be sitting ducks to invulnerable Russian submarines? Or will NATO's undersea fleet be drawn into this new chapter of the conflict that appears to have been opened in the Black Sea? With Geeta Mahone in Sevastopol, Crimea, Bureau Report, India Today.
And as Russia brings in its submarines to conduct these first missile attacks, it appears to have been preempted because nuclear attack submarines of NATO forces from the US and France have converged along with British nuclear submarines at a secretive naval base in Scotland, because they believe that this kind of messaging will be necessary to remind Putin and his navy that the NATO will stop at nothing.
Third month of this war, and Putin's war machine shows no signs of really pulling back. From Kyiv to Kharkiv to the hellscape of Ukraine's Mariupol, Russia has been trembled, but Putin's iron fist remains in the battlefield. Now, with Sweden and Finland signaling their intent to join NATO, Putin has warned that there will be nuclear consequences in the Baltic region. Russia, remember, has already placed its nuclear arsenal on operational alert, brandishing them before a nervous world. But just as this fresh geopolitical quake sends shivers across Europe amidst escalating tensions between Russia and NATO, a small naval base in Scotland is seeing a not-so-secretive Western muscle flex. Nuclear submarines from the United Kingdom, the United States and France have all converged at Scotland's Clyde naval base in an apparent show of nuclear strength to a Russia that has stocked nuclear since the beginning of the Ukraine invasion. From a US Navy Virginia-class nuclear-powered cruise missile fast attack submarine to a French Rubis-class nuclear submarine, the nuclear submarines of the two NATO powers arriving together has been projected as routine, but the messaging is undeniably pointed at Russia. The Clyde naval base is also home to the Royal Navy's Vanguard-class nuclear ballistic missile submarines and Astute-class nuclear attack submarines. In other words, American, French and British nuclear submarines converging to send Putin a nuclear-tipped NATO message. While these NATO nuclear attack submarines are built for sustained and rapid underwater operations that can prove a nightmare to Russia's maritime forces, ballistic missile submarines are a whole different deal, lurking slowly and visibly, waiting for orders to deliver weapons of mass destruction at land targets. Russia's own nuclear ballistic missile submarines, remember, had ventured into the North Atlantic at the beginning of this war as a similar message to NATO. But Russia's recent test of its most capable nuclear missile, the Sarmat, has heightened nuclear temperatures dramatically and could be seen as the latest in a series of nuclear moves by Russia, compelling NATO to reciprocate with some well-defined power projection. Nuclear war may be unthinkable, but how high can such temperatures really go? Bureau Report, India Today.
In what is being seen as one of the most decisive escalations in over 70 days of this conflict, it's Russia declaring in no uncertain terms that NATO vehicles and supply columns bringing in weapons and ammunition into Ukraine will now be legitimate targets that the Russian war machine will actively seek to destroy. There are a huge number of questions after this statement was made by the Russian defense minister. Take a look.
71 days into the Ukraine war, with town after town and city after city either reduced to rubble or falling to Russian hands, Putin has issued a warning that has the potential to make this a much bigger conflict than it already is. The warning articulated by Russia's defense minister.
The United States and its NATO allies are continuing to pump weapons into Ukraine. I want to mention that we view any transport to the North Atlantic Alliance arriving on territory of the country destined to Ukraine army as a legitimate target to be destroyed.
What the Russian defense minister has said is already sending shockwaves. The Russian military has repeatedly conducted strikes on Ukrainian depots containing Western weapons. But actually striking Western transports delivering those weapons would mark a significant escalation in this conflict. The Russian warning is therefore a direct threat to the larger security situation in Europe. So far, NATO has played a support role in Ukraine, shipping containers full of advanced weapons and ammunition, military hardware and combat supplies across the Polish border into Ukraine. NATO has also played a second critical but invisible role, aiding Ukrainian defense forces with satellite data, targeting intelligence and sensor access to help attack Russian positions and assets with accuracy. If NATO vehicles and trucks carrying weapons become legitimate targets to the Russians, does that mean that NATO will be forced to hit back when attacked? And if that happens, what is the nature of the escalation ladder? And where will it actually end? Bureau Report, India Today.
You perhaps have heard of how the terrorist group ISIS in Iraq and Syria had once begun to use drones fitted with rudimentary explosive devices as tiny little bombers to inflict damage on US and other countries' troops. Well, the same thing is happening now, but it's by the Ukrainian military using rudimentary drones that you can buy in any shop, fitting them with little grenades and release mechanisms, and wreaking havoc on Russian infantry groups.
For over 2 months now, drones have done untold damage in the Russia-Ukraine battlefield. From smashing tanks, to destroying artillery, to even bombing patrol boats on the Black Sea. Drones armed with laser-guided missiles and suicide drones, where the drone itself is the missile, have defined a high-technology battlefield where few targets are beyond reach. And now, a newly revealed chapter of this escalating drone war in Ukraine. What you're about to watch is a piece of footage capturing the use of small drones and applied to cause devastating pinpointed damage. Watch now closely as this drone quietly films from the air as a group of Russian troops mobilize on an unspecified dirt road in Ukraine. Swooping up over them, the drone quietly drops an improvised grenade on the unsuspecting troops, injuring some and sending the rest running. In an eerie moment, the drone stops and zooms in on the injured soldiers. The drone lies in wait and then slowly moves to observe the Russian troops, including one of the injured men, getting into a pickup truck. With the target just sitting there, the drone then deploys a second grenade, sending it straight down through the sunroof of the vehicle. precision strike smashing into the truck and exploding, sending the vehicle careening, the injuries to the men captured in zoom mode. What you've just witnessed is footage tweeted out by Ukraine's Interior Affairs Minister of what is possibly the lowest cost airstrike in existence. A method that's been used in the past by ISIS in Iraq and Syria, a method that's being tested by US Marines, and now using a definite degree of hardware improvisation deployed to devastating micro effect by Ukraine against Russian troops. What Ukraine has demonstrated is the use of drones across the damage spectrum over 2 months. From the use of drones to distract and then facilitate the sinking of Russia's biggest ship in the Black Sea, to the bombing of fast-moving boats, to devastating tanks and armor, to now even picking out individual groups of troops. The gap for escape is rapidly closing and at nearly no cost. Bureau Report, India Today.
Here on Battle Cry, we've been tracking every single advanced NATO weapon system that's been cleared to enter into the Ukraine fight. Remember, it is these advanced weapons developed by countries like the United States, Germany and Britain and France that have actually allowed Ukraine to put up such a credible fight against a much superior invading force, Russia. Here's a report on the 2 more new weapon systems that have been cleared and will soon enter the fight for Ukraine. Take a look.
Ukraine's fight back. Its monumental homeland defense for over 2 months has overwhelmed world headlines. A former Soviet state, flooded with Western weapons to take on a gigantic invader, has come to define a reloaded Cold War amidst the heat of a very real battle. And now, after over 2 months of death, destruction and damage, 2 more Western weapons have been lined up for the Ukrainian military. The United States has just cleared consignments of M777 155mm ultra-light artillery guns for Ukraine. A handy and powerful weapon is also in service with the Indian Army. On Thursday, the US Department of Defense released these images of M777 guns loaded into C-17 transport jets for a ferry flight to Ukraine. The Australian government has also shipped sets of M777 guns to Ukraine. The M777 is an ultra-light howitzer gun that has seen action in Afghanistan, with the capability to fire shells, including smart shells, to ranges of anywhere between 25 and 40 kilometers, and will highly welcome for Ukrainian border artillery units looking to target Russian positions. The other weapon system cleared for delivery to Ukraine is the Brimstone ship-based guided missile system. British media reports suggest that the weapons could be supplied both in their anti-ship as well as land attack versions. The missile could pack formidable close-in punch on small ships and boats in the Black Sea, a theatre where the Ukrainian military scored the mother of all kills recently with the claimed sinking of Russia's Moskva cruiser. The Brimstone could prove an even bigger nuisance to the Russian Navy's Black Sea assets. The 2 new Western weapons join a steady flow of military hardware into Ukraine, allowing the invaded nation to mount a credible defense of territory despite the enormous damage done to its soil. The weapons have been cleared at a decisive time in the combat. The latest Russian missile attacks on Kyiv, weeks after Russia had de-escalated in Ukraine's capital, suggest that Putin's war machine could still attack in areas it disengaged from. The escalation ahead will clearly see more advanced weapons and likely more destructive combat. Bureau Report, India Today.
One of the most significant airstrikes that has taken place in the Russia-Ukraine conflict so far was by the Ukrainian Navy just a few days ago, where they were managed to use their drones to actually attack and destroy naval assets of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. Take a look, very significant.
An armed Russian boat prowling the Black Sea off the southern coast of Ukraine. The boat has no idea it has been spotted from the skies. And then this happens. In the blink of an eye, the 55-foot Russian patrol boat obliterated over the waves. Minutes later, a second boat is seen speeding away, but it's too late. This boat too has no escape because it's been struck from the skies by a relentless bombing machine. The Ukrainian government claims that these are images of two Russian Raptor-class high-speed coastal patrol boats, bombed into oblivion courtesy laser-guided bombs delivered by Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2 drones. The strikes on these two boats is enormously significant. They capture the first time in this war that these drones have actively engaged and destroyed Russian naval assets.
In over 2 months of the war, Ukrainian combat drones have got a lot of success by hitting their targets. But now, for the first time, they have achieved this success over an open ocean. Now, there are reports that Ukrainian combat drones have successfully hit Russian boats in the Black Sea.
The laser-guided munitions used in this new over-ocean attack are likely the Russian MAM, a smart micro-munition designed to hit both stationary and moving targets with devastating accuracy. The destruction of the two Russian Navy patrol boats will be a painful sting for Putin's war machine, coming 18 days after the sinking of the Black Sea Fleet's flagship cruiser Moskva, an incident that is still sending shockwaves around the world for what it means to Ukraine's defense capabilities. The two boats struck in this manner may be much smaller than the Moskva, but the signal from Ukraine is clear. No matter how small the Russian asset and no matter where it's operating, with the help of American and Western intelligence, electronics and targeting sensors, nothing will be out of reach for Ukrainian weapons. Bureau Report, India Today.